Please sign in and state your name.
Carol Eastep, 2470 Arnold Street. As a member of the Parks Board and the DuPont Historical Society, I would like to say thank you to everyone who came out on Saturday to help clean up the parks and open spaces in DuPont. We had a great work crew working at Robinson Park and the museum, and I was totally impressed with what was accomplished. Much thanks to Mary and Jim Rico, Lee and Bill McDonald, Penny and Roy Coffey, Linda Cumberbatch, my husband Eldon, and members of the DuPont Grace Birch Church. A special thank you to Allison and her son Nathan, who not only came to pull weeds, but also brought forth some coffee with them. The barbecue at the home course was a nice way to end the morning, and I was impressed with the number of young scouts that were there, both boys and Girl Scouts, who came out to help pull weeds. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Anyone else, any item on or off the agenda? Again, this is the first of two opportunities tonight.
David Bunger, 2720 MacArthur, item, can't see it now, it's 11, I think, whatever, the bond issue. So on April, earlier this month, you had a long-term financial forecast, and it shows you have a deficit and you can't meet obligations by 2019. Your call dates are 44 months away for the bonds, the COPs of January 2019. You can actually come up with a plan and present to the voters in 2018, November, and finance the Civic Center, saving millions of dollars by not having to have an escrow account. You will meet the call date. You can do it right. You can stop kicking the can down the road, and you can actually do it right. Thank you.
Anyone else, any item on or off the agenda tonight? All right, we'll go to the approval of the consent agenda. And just an editor's note, there's been a few minor typo changes to the April 2014 council minutes that were in the packet, and the updated minutes have been provided to you on your on the rostrum here. If anyone wants to look those over, we can wait a minute before you approve them. So whenever someone's ready, feel free to make a motion. Motion's been made by Councilmember Coffey, seconded by Councilmember Eastep. Any discussion, council? This is really exciting news for me personally and for us as a city. When I came into office, providing financial stability was personally one of my top priorities as your mayor. We worked together as a community to accomplish this. There were many people that served on that financial advisory committee. There were previous council members that served in capacity that played a role, and there's the current council that played a role in this. And because we've updated our long-term financial plan, because we look long-term, because we've taken positive steps to manage our finances in the last 4 years, we were just upgraded from a AA to AA+. And I can't underscore the significance of this accomplishment. And really, the kudos goes to Kate and to Ted that did a lot of the work to prepare me for this presentation and to just maintain a steady hand on the rudder over our finances for the last 4 years. I want to remind folks that our city was last upgraded February 12th, 2014 from an A+ to a AA. And to come up and have another rating increase this soon is really unprecedented. So congratulations to everyone involved, and specifically to Katie and Ted for all your hard work. So please join me in giving them a round of applause. Looking forward, and speaking of economic development, which was one of the key factors in having these conversations with the credit rating board, I've been having several tours over at the Intel property, and one of the recent discussions was about establishing a cyber training center. I've mentioned this before in comments, but we actually did a physical tour of the property with folks from the Puget Sound Economic Development Board, the Pierce County Economic Development Board, governor's office, commerce, all of our federal delegation. Everyone was really impressed. We've had several meetings there and hope to have a new technology company moving in there later this summer. So there's lots of good things that are happening over there at Intel. And what I'd like to do in the future is, I've had many residents say, I'd like to peek behind the curtain. I'd like to do an Intel tour. So please stay tuned for that. We'll provide an opportunity for the public to do a tour. It's really it's a fascinating building of what's there and candidly what's not there. We've got everything from built out facilities to vacant walls, things that, literally from the studs and the concrete, that's pretty much it. And so there's lots of diverse opportunities for future tenants in that building, and we're excited to have those conversations and those tour opportunities going forward. I want to thank everyone, echoing Carol's comments, that showed up for Parks Appreciation Day. We had over 100 volunteers, and what wasn't highlighted in detail was the project specifically. And so we had Center Drive Median, Ross Plaza, Jensen Park, the museum, and work at the cemetery, removing invasive species. And in addition to the folks that Carol made, I really want to thank the council members that were present. The Councilmember Westman, who really spearheaded the invasive species removal effort over there at the cemetery, and Councilmember Coffey, that was leading the way over at the museum. And so thank you again to everyone that was there. For those that were not able to attend that or the U.S. Open information session, that was another great opportunity, to recognize our volunteers, as Carol talked about, but to also provide some critical information about the upcoming U.S. Open. The key thing that I really want to leave with everyone is we will have a qualifying round that will take place here in the city of DuPont on May 11th. And it is an awesome opportunity to get out, walk the course, see the players, see these U.S. Open caliber players that will be playing here, and you can watch them for free in our own backyard. So that's incredible. The second thing is, there will be a lot of heightened traffic and attention that our community will be getting. Our hotels are full with USGA officials and Fox News. They will all be staying here in DuPont. But traffic will be impacted, and those impacts will change on a daily basis. And so on our website, we posted information. We'll have regular information on social media, in Pierce County and U.S. Open and University Place, where the tournament is actually taking place. We'll have information. But I would just encourage people to really pay attention and check those traffic updates on a regular basis, because they will change. On that note, while we're talking about golf, it came up at a work session that we actually haven't had a conversation about and a report on what the economic impact to the city was when we had the U.S. Amateur, and I think the council members will bring that up. So we will have that conversation. I know there was written information that was recited by council members and the public going back and forth of what some of those numbers were and were not. Some of them were good, some of them were not, they were stagnant. But we'll have that conversation as promised to the council, and so something to stay tuned for going forward. The last thing I want to emphasize is the spring cleanup. This will be hosted by LeMay. They played a big role in removing the invasive species, all that Scotch bloom that was over there at the cemetery. LeMay will again be sponsoring the spring cleanup. That'll be Saturday, May 9th at 9:30, and it's a curbside cleanup, so everyone that has trash and debris and things that you want to remove from your house, you can just safely dispose of that at the curb, as long as it's not greater than 45 pounds. That'll be something that'll be easy to be taken care of by the LeMay company. So when you see them, please join me in thanking them, and if you want more information, there's a flyer on our website. I think that's it for me. Ted, updates from the city administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. I promised a very energetic freshman to stay from high school. I would have mentioned this. It's a green event. It's a fundraiser. It's a 5K that they're doing. It starts at Fort Silicon Park on May 16th. Check-in meetings at 8 a.m. So I want to make sure everyone knew about that. Also, the Parks and Rec auction is coming up. That's on May 8th. Doors are open at 6:30 at the DuPont Fire Pit right across the street. Tickets are $20. You can get them at City Hall. And you cannot get them at the door this year, is my understanding. So make sure you get them in advance. Maybe wrong on that. Okay, good. It's good to be right. Have to get them at City Hall. Thank you. And then at one of the recent council meetings, we were talking about traffic on Center Drive, the speed and kind of congestion, especially around Amazon hours. So our police department did a low meter and low measured traffic study, and traffic emphasis patrol, and starting to hold once you walk us through that, please.
Thanks, Ed, Council Mayor. So after that meeting, we held a speed emphasis. It was from April 1st through the April 13th. And we did it, we attempted to do it twice a day. So the beginning times were 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. And then the second time during the same day between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., which were corresponded with their shift change and stuff. The area in which we had the guys trying to do their emphasis was from Center Drive to Manchester on Center Drive, or excuse me, Civic Drive on Center Drive to Manchester. So we concentrated the guys in that area. We also used the speed trailer to help gather some of the data and stuff. So just a quick brief rundown for you on that. Of the days that we did that, 9 of those days we were able to meet our goal where we were able to run the emphasis with one officer during both times during the day. 4 days we had where we didn't meet that because during one of those time frames, officers had to respond to calls for service and were pulled from that area, so they weren't able to continue during that time frame. So in total, we made 57 contacts. Of the 57 contacts, there was 38 tickets or NOIs that were written for various things. The majority of all of those 38 had to do with speed. Some of the warnings that we were given, there were 12 warnings for speed given and 7 what we call non-traffic warnings. The non-traffic warnings would have been somebody was pulled over for speeding and they also had a broken tail light or a windshield or had something wrong with their registration. And so instead of giving them multiple tickets, the officer would write the speeding but give them the warning on the opposite for the infraction. They didn't know their headlight was out or their tail light, tell them to get those fixed. The 12 speeding warnings, we gave the guys a little bit of leeway. So what we asked of them was if they were, all of those speeding warnings came at 8 miles an hour or under. So your speedometer comes from the factory with a couple miles an hour, give or take. So we added an extra mile to that, making it 3. And then we told the guys between another 5 miles an hour, we would give them discretion on whether they wanted to write that ticket or not, but to still try to make the stops because it was education to see the patrol car on the side of the road with the car stopped. So that happened 12 times. Anything over 9 or over during that time frame, they were issued the tickets, and that reflects in the 38 that you saw. A breakdown of the tickets. Once the officers stopped the car, one of the questions that we asked was where they were coming from or where they were going to, so that we could get an idea of who we were dealing with and what was going on and who they were in that area. 15 of the tickets that we wrote went to, unfortunately, went to citizens of DuPont. 18 of the tickets that we wrote went to non-residents. Of the non-residents, those are the residents that were traveling to and from through our city because they were tired of the traffic on I-5. So they hop off I-5, come the back way, and they shoot down Center Drive and they were speeding. Actually, Mayor Graham got to witness some of that himself one day as he was...
Not on the receiving end.
And then breaking that down just a little bit farther to answer the question, the real reason why we were there during those time frames to answer some of the citizens' questions, 5 tickets went to Amazon employees. One of those tickets of the 5 was a multiple ticket where he was speeding, didn't have insurance, and had a suspended license. The data also received from the trailer gave us our busiest times of the day on Center Drive, because it was there for long periods of time, and which come out to be between 12 and 1 p.m. and actually 4 and 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And it actually gave us a little bit farther, showing that our highest speeds actually correspond with those time frames. So we actually have our highest volume of traffic during that time, and that's actually when our highest speeders are. Which makes sense. We have the military coming in at lunchtime, so that's the reason why we're getting the highest flow during the lunch hour. And then at nighttime, we all know the traffic on I-5 going southbound is almost non-existent, so people getting off the freeway. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Sergeant. Yeah, and I just want to add 2 things. One is, I really appreciate you guys jumping on that. I mean, when the residents came forward and said, hey, check out these times, we said we were going to do it, you guys jumped on it, you were out there the next day. So thank you for that quick response to the issues and the timing that residents raised. I think this is a great response. The other thing is, just for folks that don't know or need a reminder in the audience, we've established our own court now. And so the revenue that we collect is ours. I appreciate the grace that's been given to the residents and the focus on people that are outsiders. But the equipment that these guys are using, our officers, I mean, it is amazing. I mean, literally, they will pinpoint 4 cars and they can tell the speed of each car. So if you do get a ticket in DuPont, I wouldn't fight it. It's pretty rock solid. So just impressive work, and please extend our thanks and appreciation to the rest of the police team. Councilmember Gossett, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you for the breakdown on all of this. I appreciate it, and I'm so happy that we were able to respond to the concerns for the people in Edmonds Village, and that the time frame was narrowed down. I really appreciate. I think it was Teddy Arstack that gave us that information. My question was actually, was there one particular officer that was doing this? Because I noticed a disproportionate number of tickets. In particular, I don't know if I should name, but there's one officer who gives out a lot.
Yes.
So I had a question about that.
Yes.
Actually, what it is as our schedule, we have certain guys that were in FTO that are coming out of FTO.
Okay.
And they are on what we call a swing shift right now. It's a modified shift that we run from 2 in the afternoon to 2 in the morning. So they're off FTO, but we're still watching them while they're on their probationary period. I have one that's off, one that's not. So that one officer that you saw that wrote the abundance of those tickets, he was a free officer, so he's on the schedule, but his time is free. So we made sure that we assigned him to the emphasis so that while during those times he was there and not being pulled from it. Because the first couple of days is when we realized, hey, wait a minute, we're going to run into a problem because our officers keep being called for calls for service. So once we identified that problem early on, I assigned that officer to it. So when he worked, he was there. So that's why you see his numbers are a little higher.
That's what I thought was going on, but I wanted to ask. My next question was, I was noticing quite a few tickets given out for going 5 miles over the speed limit, and it didn't appear to be school zone tickets. Could you elaborate on that? Is there a particular area where there's been a problem?
Is this during the infantry or?
It was, there was I think I counted like 8 or 9 that were 5 miles, going 5 miles over the speed limit, but it didn't say that it was a school zone, because there was a school zone itemized under one officer. So I don't know if maybe it just didn't get itemized. I just
Not where you're looking in the report.
on page 90 and 91, I think. Yeah, page 90, on the bottom of page 90, there's 5 tickets for going 5 miles over the speed limit in a 40 or under zone. And then I saw 2 on page 91. I was just curious if that was it. Are those school zones, or is there
No,
one
it's
area?
off McNeil.
McNeil, okay.
McNeil. So that's where our next area that we're headed to start dealing with some of the speeding stuff that's coming into the chief. And so some of those guys are working, those are tickets that are coming late in the evening time. So
All right, good.
They're
So
doing
citizens be warned.
yeah.
Yes, don't speed on McNeil. All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Good job.
But before we wrap up, Sergeant, could you also talk about the truck emphasis that's next? I think that was it's important for people to get.
Yes, next month we'll be bringing in the county's metro commercial vehicle enforcement team. So we have a member, Officer Nelson, who is going through the process right now to become certified himself, and is a member of that team. So he was out at a training out in Fife. We went out there, we talked to them, and they're going to bring in 5 officers from the county. So there'll be a couple from Pierce County, a couple from Fife, and then we'll have our guy, and I believe Lakewood sending somebody, or no, Tacoma, I'm sorry. And so they'll come into the area, and what they'll do is I think you guys saw the last time we were here, you started wondering why we had semis parked along the side of the road in the middle after the noon, or in the early after morning hours. So they'll come in, they'll stop the trucks on the side of the road, and they'll do a full inspection right there. This time, what we did last time was we kind of brought them in, we deadlined their trucks and gave them some warnings and told them that they needed to meet with their company and get some compliance. This time around, when they come in, they'll be doing a lot of citations and stuff, so that should be coming next month. So we'll give you an update when it's in, so you understand why the trucks are parked everywhere.
Thanks, Sergeant. Anything else?
Thanks, Sergeant Holt. I just wanted to clarify, for everybody. I know you probably heard Sergeant Holt say some speeds with, 5, 8, everything else. This is for a traffic emphasis. I want to remind everybody, anything over the speed limit, you're risking getting a ticket. This is a data gathering opportunity. I don't want people thinking you can drive 9 miles an hour faster in DuPont. That's not how this works. And it's kind of what Councilmember Gasky was getting after. It's a standardization. It's so that one officer's, personal influence or decision making is not affecting the study. And just remind everybody, the number one goal of law enforcement is to stop the illegal behavior and perform education to the next one. So that's why officers have latitude. But I did want to bring it up. Don't go over 9 miles an hour on DuPont and think you're safe, because that's not the way it is. And that includes my part.
Thanks, Ed. Council reports. Any reports from council? Councilmember Westman and Councilmember reports.
Yes, I'd like to report on that Scotch broom pull that we did at the cemetery. We had 13 citizen volunteers over there, and the ages ran from 7 years of age on up to 80, myself, being involved in that process. We had our administrator and mayor involved. A special thanks to Charlie Maxwell from LeMay, who provided the container in which we put the pulled Scotch broom, and he took on the task of being able to maximize the contents in the container by stacking them across. So we were able to fill the entire container and then some. Unfortunately, we weren't able to finish the project. There was probably a couple hours left over there. We're planning on pulling the Scotch broom, perhaps in coordination with another Scotch broom pull that would be at the 1833 Fort site. Now, that particular site is located out in the golf course area, and I have asked Public Works to coordinate access so that we can go there and do a Scotch broom pull. The concern I have is that with this overgrowth in vegetation, it might contribute to a loss of the integrity of the site. And that's important that we do maintain the integrity of that particular site, so that when it comes time that we have public access, that the site would be prepared and not have to go through this removal of the overgrowth and so on. So that's a consideration. Along with that, I have suggested to Carol Estep this evening that the cemetery site be included into our heritage plan, so that we can properly recognize the significance of the cemetery and the contents therein, together with signage, and also have Public Works put it on their maintenance schedule, so that we will be able to have that site as definitely part of our heritage. So it's important that we recognize our historical sites, and this is one effort by which hopefully we'll get that recognition out. So again, I want to thank everyone that was involved in that, and we still have a couple of hours yet to go over there, and we'll get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wesson. Councilmember reports, and then Councilmember Gasson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple items. This Thursday, I'll be representing DuPont at the Puget Sound Regional Council General Assembly. I'll be a delegate. I don't know if you're attending that or not, but I will be at the convention center enjoying parking in downtown Seattle. Next Monday, I'll be meeting with Mr. Van Swain, the Business Development Director for Pierce Transit. We're moving to the next stage of the dialogue. City Administrator Danik attended the Pierce Transit Board presentation on potential to restore public transit in DuPont, and it's a it's a long process. And there's a lot of work between our staff and their staff, and at the end of the day, it would have to be something that the citizens of DuPont felt was in their best interest, and that Pierce Transit thought was a viable business plan. So we're just starting to move into the next phase of this, and I'll keep people informed as we do that.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Woods. Councilmember Gasson.
Yes, I wanted to mention that the auction is on Friday, but the next day we also have a safety fair at the DuPont Civic Center. Free admission. There's going to be a police and fire there, safety awareness, and helmet sales, and the Lions Club is putting on a barbecue and some children's activities. It says you can touch a truck and touch a police car. So it sounds like they'll have officers kind of interacting with the kids a bit too. So I wanted to get that out there. That's Saturday at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Yeah, if you have not been to the Touch the Truck event, it is awesome. My little shavers, they love it. You get to go sit in there, drive the wheel, and put on the hat and all that stuff. So it's really cool. So hopefully everyone can attend those great events. Any other council reports? All right, we'll go into department reports. And I just want to say, folks, this is a great opportunity for us to, consistently communicate with the council and with the public. I was having a conversation with a council member this weekend and said, there's some opportunities to continue to improve the information and content that comes from our reports, both from the staff and from the boards that work so hard to serve our community. And so I just wanted that to not go unnoticed or unrecognized. And the cool thing is, we have a culture of continuous improvement. And so as people see opportunities for improving the reports, improving the communication, as everyone knows, we're working to improve the data. Let us know that, and so we can factor that in. And I appreciate the feedback that we've gotten so far. So with that, Council, any questions about the information that's been provided to date in the department reports? Councilmember West.
Yes, Katie, would you explain page 51? I'm not familiar with that particular chart, and I'd like to know a little bit more about that chart. It has to do with single-family residence and multi-family, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, and it looks like there's revenue that's involved in this. And would you explain that a little bit more so that I can understand it?
I'll take that for you, Councilman Westman. That is actually kind of what the mayor was referring to. About 2 months ago, in a council packet, I moved the building report away from kind of prose-ish, flowery language and made it more of a chart. And so let me walk you through this real quick.
Okay.
So this is the old building report, and in 2015, these are all the March numbers. So there are some remodels valued at $4,600. The permit fee that we collect is $192, and you can follow all the different categories down. Unfortunately, it's a very large chart, so you have to turn the page to get the grand totals. And you can see everything from fire permits, fire systems, plan review fees. It breaks down the revenue, how it came in, where it came in from, and then it's got a year-over-year comparison to March of 2014-13 to see some trend items. So it's simply, we've changed the format a little bit. You used to get the Word document with the chart, and I got a lot of feedback from council members saying that this is like unreadable, we don't understand it. So what I've done is just kind of taken extracts of what we use on staff, and I think as you go through it, it clearly shows all the activity.
Thank you.
Additional questions, Council? Councilmember West.
I have a few. Back over to finance, page 59. I noticed under general fund for the mayor and the city administrator and so on, it's blank. How come we have not spent anything?
It's like on the revenue side. I see that this got into the packet on portrait instead of on landscape format, so if you'll turn the page to the other side. And I do apologize, I was out sick on the time these were put out, but the expenditures are on the other side. So we will make sure that this does not happen again, that it gets formatted in the proper way.
Thank you. Little confusing.
Additional questions, comments? Councilmember West?
Here again.
You just leave it on.
Okay, good. Looking at page 64. This is an area that I regularly check. And I noticed for the school district that there's an amount of $4,300 annual. Since there, that falls within that category of 90 to 120 days. Is there an explanation?
I'm going to defer to the city administrator on that question.
Okay.
There is I see it's a good one this week. That is, and it's my fault, it's improperly categorized as late. That is the payment for the school signs. I'm in negotiation with the school district to see if we can do an in-kind swap instead of them paying cash. But we need to develop on our side some in-kind that they can offer that'll be worth $4,800. So that is not a late payment, and I'll get that fixed next meeting. It's standard normal business between two governments.
Additional questions or comments? All right, we'll go on to new business. The first topic is something that I shared with folks last week, or last council meeting, that we'd be bringing forward. It's a solicitor's ordinance. Sergeant Holt is going to brief us. But this also stems out of a lot of complaints that we've been receiving from folks about solicitations that have been happening at the doorstep, issues that our police have been having to address. And so what we did is, in listening to that, our folks, we drafted up a solicitor's ordinance for council's consideration. So this is the first reading. There's no action tonight, but this is an opportunity for the council to review it, to discuss it for public input, and then we'll take action at a later date after we get feedback. So Sergeant Holt, you want to walk us through this at the high level?
Good evening. This ordinance was discussed at the last city council meeting on April 14th. Based on that discussion, section 5.1, 5.080, there was you guys came up with some ideas of wanting to have a change made. That change has been made in the one that you have now. And then I was advised today after a leadership meeting with Ted that in that same section, there were some questions about one of the words that was used in that section. And after some debate, the word molest would be pulled out, and annoyed, the word is going to replace that. And as the mayor said, this is the first reading. Alternatives, of course, are do not adopt this ordinance, adopt a new ordinance. Our recommendation is to move to a second reading.
Thank you, Sergeant. Any questions, council, comments, feedback? Councilmember Coffey.
Yes, I did have a problem with that word, perhaps, could be like, approach or whatever. But also, could we have a sign installed at the entrances to DuPont with a DMC that says that this type of law is in place? So, I've seen these in other cities. You have that emphasis.
Another sign.
I know.
We need that like a whole minute.
But I don't want to be inside of it. I think it would be a good idea to think about it.
Worthy of discussion. Other thoughts? Councilmember Reese.
I'm interested in hearing how this will most affect the businesses that are in place. Perhaps we're doing business here in DuPont. Perhaps you could give me some examples of who would be impacted by this. I know we're trying to sort of focus in on some people that are causing some problems, but for those that aren't doing business here in town, and I'll just throw a couple out here, what would the impact be on Amish Schwartzman, or the ice cream lady or guy? Girl Scouts, those kind of things. If you could sort of tell me what the real world impact is going to be, that'd be great.
Well, first, this doesn't apply to nonprofits, it wouldn't affect Girl Scouts. With regards to swans, I mean, if they're gonna go in and go door to door and try to get more sales, I mean, they can come in and get a permit to do so. For the ice cream truck, I don't think it would necessarily be restricted unless they start going door to door. You know, just driving through the neighborhood, you know, that's not illegal for this ordinance, so. Again, this ordinance only addresses commercial activity. That was the focus that I was told to look at. And I think I mentioned before, I don't think the city should, well, if it's going to get into political or nonprofit type activities, tread very lightly. So that might be a discussion for that day.
And again, the door-to-door activity is authorized under this if they get a permit. Is that correct?
Correct, unless someone has a no solicitation posted on their house.
Other questions, comments? Councilmember West.
Under the definition of solicitor, it indicates that it's anyone who takes orders for sales of goods, wares, merchandise, services, or anything of value for future delivery or performance from the persons not commercial users or sellers of such commodities or services. I go door to door soliciting volunteers in order to participate in such broom poll. That surely would not fall into that category, since I'm not trying to sell them anything except perhaps assist them to recognize their responsibility to contribute to the general welfare of the city through using their services in a volunteer status. Is that correct? It wouldn't be in there, would it? Do I have to get a permit?
I don't think it would prohibit that. I mean, it's kind of an example where you could argue that it could, but I mean, that's not the purpose of this ordinance, obviously. So it's to get people who are trying to sell something commercial value. That's true.
Additional questions, comments? All right, hearing none, we'll go on to the second one. Thank you, Sergeant. Second item on our agenda is the LTGO bond ordinance. This is a second reading. In fact, the next three on the docket, including this one, are second readings, and so there will be proposed action by council. As folks know, the limited tax general obligation bond ordinance is something that we've discussed before. Refinancing the debt is something that wasn't really feasible, wasn't cost effective when I first came into office. But when we look at our close proximity to the bonds being callable on the Civic Center, and specifically the low interest rates, the timing of this was something that we wanted to capitalize on as soon as possible. And so that's why we brought this forward for council to consider. There's been several council members that have been actively involved in this process, from selecting the people that work with us and having active discussions on this. And so this is the second reading. I know I had a meeting on Sunday with some folks that were interested in exploring this bond option as either now, stop the action that is going to be taken tonight, and basically hold off and hope that interest rates, stay low and look at a long-term solution for bond refinancing. I didn't see the benefit in delaying the option that we have now to do the first phase one approach of refinancing, especially when we look at the cost savings that we'll realize with $100,000 to $120,000, which will be significant. But as council knows and we've discussed, this is a phased approach. There is a phase two, and I did express openness, as I did last meeting, and so did council members, to at least exploring a bond for that second phase of the approach. But that's not what we're discussing tonight. So I just wanted to clarify that. Kate, could you give us a background refresher and talk about what is up for vote tonight for consideration by council?
Absolutely, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, first of all, we've been having this conversation ongoing. As the mayor said earlier, we have had a bond rating increase, which we are very excited about. This should further increase the savings that we anticipate getting. We don't know at this time exactly how much that will be, but that's just one more thing that will push these savings to an even higher level, and we're very excited about that. I also want to remind everyone that refinancing these does not preclude us from going to the voters for a levy, although it does preclude us from going to a bond for these amounts. It in no way precludes us from going to the voters for a levy to cover these costs in the future, should the time arise. So right now, what we're trying to do is be prudent fiduciaries, prudent keepers, basically, of the money and catch the savings while we can, so that we can pass these on to the taxpayers. So this, we believe, is the best time, given the market and the situation that we have explained to all of you, for this bond refinancing. This bond ordinance, just to reiterate what you are specifically voting on here, this bond ordinance gives the authority to execute the 2 refinancings given certain criteria. It's a maximum of 20 million. This does not mean that we're issuing 20 million in bonds. This just gives a maximum amount for the 2 issuances, 10 million this year, 10 million next year, for the refinancing. It also sets a minimum amount of net present value of savings of 5%. That means should the market take an upturn, we no longer have the ability to sign on the dotted line when that time comes. And this gives the authority to the mayor, to the city administrator, and to myself to pull the trigger when the interest rates are optimal once we go to bond pricing, and then to close on hopefully June 2nd should this pass. This bond ordinance is critical in the next process of things. The official statement has the date up tonight as far as passing this, and it's the next step. Everybody's on hold right now for moving forward with this, with the pricing pending your approval for this evening. So if there are no questions, I would recommend that this bond will move to be adopted.
Questions, comments from council? If not, we can take a motion, a second, and then go into discussion. Councilmember Weston, is that a motion or a question?
Question. Having to do with the 3rd paragraph down from the background on your introduction. It says the attached ordinance authorizes the issuance of 2 series. My concern there is one of establishment. It authorizes the establishment of 2 series, not necessarily the issuance, because later on, we don't know, as a council anyhow, what the final approved provisions in that final format. My concern is that we as a council are responsible for the financial aspects of the city, not the city mayor or the city administrator or the financial director. I feel it's important for council to give the final authority, the authorization, once it has been negotiated and it is in its final form for approval, that it be brought back to council for council approval, and then the 3 of you can go sign the documents if it's approved. And we don't know the conditions under which this is going to be, so I'm apprehensive to go ahead and just give you a blank issuance here saying, go ahead and put together the best deal possible whenever you, the 3 of you, decide it is the best deal.
And I can understand that concern, and that is up to you for approving or disapproving. We can't move forward with the bond issuance the way it is set up without this. It would involve a special meeting being called, having a quorum at literally a moment's notice. It's very quick when it is ready for closing. I'd like to defer to the city administrator if he has any additional comments on that question.
No, excuse me, I would just expound on, that's a fairly normal way to do this. The bonds are traded on a daily basis and really by the minute. And And so with this authorization, with the boundaries that council gives to the mayor and the executive branch, that sets the limits that council says, this is okay for you to go on behalf of the city, or it's not okay. That's the amount, the savings that we're going to get, and so on, and Ms. Henry agreed. So pragmatically speaking, coming back to council, there really is almost no way to do that, because they're on the floor, just like you see in TV, they're trading bonds or making phone calls, and they make an offering of 10 blocks of a $100,000 block. So an investor wants to buy $1 million. They talk to the bond broker, I want to pay you $5, I want $550, they negotiate down, they set a price. As Ms. Henry would say, then we would have to find 4 of you where you are at that moment in time, brief you on the price. We really wouldn't even be able to calculate the actual savings of the entire environment. And I think it would be unwieldy. It's certainly right, and I understand your concern about Ms. Henry, but that would be very unwieldy, and frankly, I'm not sure how we would even carry that out. Almost all organizations delegate the authority to a person or persons, and here in this form of government, it makes logical sense to use the executive branch. I would ask Ms. Henry back again, if they tighten the boundaries, will that affect it? It shouldn't affect the process, correct?
If the boundaries were to be tightened, it would affect the timing potentially. If it were not passed tonight, we'd have to go to a rewrite of the official statement. It could be done, but all the official documents are in the current, since there were no previous.
That's right, yeah, all because going on behind this, it's like a prospectus when you're investing in the stock market. There's a preliminary official statement, what we call POS. I understand what the acronym is, but it's preliminary official statement. And then we have the final official statement. So the POS is what all the investors are looking at right now, and it's all filled in minus the actual day that we close and make that trade. Then the final official statement will be filled out with the actual bond price, the date, time, all that good stuff. Thank you for reminding me. So if we change anything in the ordinance, it would set us back probably another month or two. We'd have to go back to the start that we've been through this whole process. So yes, it could be done, but that's the ramifications. We'd be back a month or so, and we'd have to redo all this, and of course we'd incur a little bit more cost, especially legal fees, but it could be done.
So next, there would be a motion and a discussion, a motion, a second, and then a discussion. Is that a motion?
Sure.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Trotter and seconded by Councilmember Quartz to adopt an ordinance adopting the limited tax general obligation bond ordinance for refunding the bonds for the 2009 CFPs. Discussion? Councilmember Trotter?
I hear what Roger, Councilmember Westman is saying. I think that we can rest assured that this ordinance was drafted saying that if we cannot lower our interest rate that we will be paying on these bonds, we will not refinance. And that's our fiduciary duty. We're only going to refinance if we can have a savings. And that's written into the ordinance, and that's the important thing. And it's saying that if we can't meet a net present value savings of 5%, which is significant over what we're paying now, we're not going to pull the trigger, and we're not going to reissue the bonds, or we're not going to refinance. And I'm very comfortable with that. I think it means that no one's going to go ahead and reissue bonds for the same amount, same interest rate that we're currently paying. We're only going to do it if we can make this 5% savings. So I'm very comfortable with that.
Councilmember Reese.
Roger, thanks for bringing up that point. I think it should be noted that we are responsible for what the citizens are paying on their mortgage, if you want to call it that. But I feel comfortable delegating that authority. That's how I feel.
Additional discussion? Councilmember Westman.
Does this ordinance in any way restrict the second series from possibly going to the vote of the citizens?
My knowledge. Okay.
It does not. It's simply, once we've had the discussions between us, It allows us to move forward without the additional legal fees of passing it again, but it in no way restricts in what way we handle that second issuance.
And I might add, Council Wilson, in no way, back to Council Eastup's point and your original point, in no way does it allow the executive branch to go out and just do this behind your back or do it in secret. So while the ordinance is written that way, what Ms. Heavy said is right. We have to come back to you because you have, at the end of the day, the ability to stop transfer money and all that stuff. So you will still maintain all your authority. Just doing this once instead of twice saves us a lot of time and effort and money.
Yeah, and just to reinforce, I mean, just because the market conditions and the environment, provided us an opportunity that we brought this forward to council. Council's been involved in this, council setting the parameters. This is something that we are deciding to do together. The execution of it is something that we will do on the administrative side. But the government's responsibility and ownership of this remains shared, as does, as I mentioned earlier, talking with constituents and council members about the opportunity to do a levy. I still question the value and the risk reward of that personally, is what I've told the people that have brought this to my attention. But I still think it's worthy of a conversation, and I would support council continuing to have that conversation if they're interested. So just to reinforce that. Councilman Borski.
Yeah, just to correct you, you mentioned levy. It's not a levy, it's a bond that people will be voting on as a general election item. You had stated levy.
And I'll be real honest. So I said bond earlier, and I thought Katie corrected me by saying levy, so that's why I switched. Katie, could you correct me?
There are two things being discussed here. Should the second half go to the voters as a bond? That could go to the voters as a bond. However, there is also the option, as there is at any time, as Mr. Daniel pointed out last time, and unfortunately with the discussions being brought on us, we weren't able to delve into that in more depth. The citizens, we always have the opportunity of going to the citizens for a levy for a variety of things to the public. So nothing precludes us from going to the citizens to cover this debt or any other type of expenditure that we should need in order to run the city. So there are two pieces. The one piece is the bond, the other piece is the levy. So I have mentioned both terms, and both terms are accurate. They're just two different things.
Right, and all I'm clarifying is we did receive feedback from citizens about a bond and not a levy, and for the second half. So I just wanted to clarify that. So a levy being something that goes in the general fund, it could be spent any way that the council sees fit. The bond would be earmarked for the specific mortgage payment of this. So just a point of clarification, not to jump around it there.
No, thank you. That's an important clarification. And either way, the other part of the conversation that we were having is, to continue looking at all available options, of which two were mentioned. I don't know if there's other options that are out there, but to continue that kind of blue sky thinking as we all work towards our common goal to, save money, reduce our debt, and keep going forward with financial prudence and responsibility that we all have in our own goals. So thank you for that. Any further discussion? If not, I will call for the vote, but I'll be patient just to see if there's any other thoughts on this. All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Coffey?
Aye.
Councilmember Quartz?
Aye.
Councilmember Easton?
Aye.
Councilmember Gassick?
Aye.
Councilmember Gorski?
Aye.
Councilmember Trotter?
Aye.
Councilmember Wesley?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries unanimously. Next on the docket is the first quarter budget adjustment ordinance. This is a second reading, and I'll call on Katie for an update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to briefly point out any changes that there are in here since we did go over this at our last meeting. The first is that there was we discovered basically $15,000 in grant funds from the Historical Society grant that had not been used and that we are still able to use through June of this year. So we wanted to put the revenue side as well as the expenditure side of this grant in so that we could use it basically it's the rest of the training grant that we've had for some years ongoing. So that will allow us to spend it down by June and to get reimbursement for that. The other piece that is a change from last year, and that there is a small change in the wording, is at the bottom of page 132. where it says recognize proceeds from a TIP grant for Wilmington Drive Overlay Project. I misspoke there, that's an STP grant, Surface Transportation Program. Those are federal funds. So there is a small change in the accounting side, just to code it as a federal grant and not as a state grant. And then there will be also an additional $14,217 when we closed out the Center Drive overlay. The TIB awarded us additional funds due to slight small increase. So the money's already been spent basically, but this will be extra that will be going into the street fund that was not previously budgeted, that was spent in 2014. Other than that, there aren't any changes to the budget amendment, but I do want to go over the alternatives that are in front of you today as far as this budget is concerned. The first would be to approve it as it is presented. The second is if there are any concerns with any of the LTAC projects, I have presented those in Exhibit C. Each of them does have a letter, so should there be a concern and should you wish to place a motion to approve it with the exception of one of the items, that option is in there and they are all identified by letter for each of them. And the third would be if there is a serious concern to not pass the budget amendment at all. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask me. I'll be happy to go over the details with you.
Any additional questions before a motion is made or not made? It's one of those things that was important for me when I looked at my packet as a council member was you always have two options. You could do something or you could do nothing. So now we have three. This is good. Question, Councilmember Quartz, or a motion?
That's a motion.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Quartz, seconded by Councilmember Issa. And Councilmember Quartz, please state the motion.
I move that we adopt the first quarter budget adjustment ordinance as written.
And Councilmember Issa, if you do not want to second that, now that he stated it, I'll give you a chance to back up. Second, still, okay. Councilmember Quartz, you're still speaking, more on discussion? Okay, discussion, council? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Coffey?
Aye.
Councilmember Quartz?
Aye.
Councilmember Vista?
Aye.
Councilmember Gassick?
Aye.
Councilmember Gorski?
Aye.
Councilmember Trotter?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries unanimously. Next is the solid waste franchise agreement ordinance. This is something we've been talking about for a while, and Ted, I really appreciate your due diligence and hard work on this. Would you please just bring us up to speed on where we've been and what's before us tonight, please?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. This is the ordinance awarding solid waste franchise. We've talked about this a number of times, but I do want to cover the highlights and things that are different in case some of our citizens didn't catch the first couple of discussions. We're switching to an automated refuse pickup system. That's the same thing that we use for recycling and lawn-yard waste. So we're getting the bigger cans. When we first talked about this with council, council had expressed the desire to really get back to work and try to get better value for the citizens. I did that, and in the interim, we'd started these negotiations before I even got here, in fact, and I took on that duty. And we had always started with a 96-gallon can, a 65-gallon can, but we found in the industry's come up with a good 45-gallon can. So I worked with LeMay, and LeMay worked up some rates to where we have a 45-gallon can, and if you did that every other week, like most of our clients and customers in the city have 32-gallon cans every week, then you'd end up paying about $7 more per month for your trash service, but you would get another 42 gallons worth of trash for that price, which is a good value. And then the other comment you made was, well, that's great that there's still more money in your pocket. So we set up an every other week pickup, which will now actually cost the citizens less than their current every week with a 32-gallon. So if citizens aren't generating a lot of trash, Councilmember Quartz mentioned his teenagers are all gone, so I'm in the same boat, and I'm probably going to take the every other week option. But we add that as the rate charge, so you can actually get more trash for less money if you went every other week. So I feel like we're bringing good value, and then the automated system, the other highlight is the citizens don't have to buy trash cans anymore. That's provided just like the recycling. Other upgrades that we've gotten is we're getting 2 more recyclable drop boxes that will be here in City Hall. Much like in Public Works, we have the glass and other plastics and things like that. We'll have one of those, and we're getting another cardboard container. We've added a fall cleanup. We've talked about the spring cleanup, but now we have a fall cleanup, which was important to council. That got added in. And then we added a couple more locations, public locations. Community Center is one of the bigger ones. And we added more community events that LeMay will come in and pick up our garbage and refuse for free. So those, I'm sorry, we added for the first time ever 4% franchise fee. And I know, I know we're in talks right now trying to figure out, what, as the mayor prepares his budget for next year, what we're going to do with that and how we'll tie that back to solid waste as council had contemplated back last year when we were first discussing this. So stay tuned on plans to use the proceeds from that franchise.
And that's a fee on the company that we negotiated with,
Right.
not a fee on residents, just to be clear.
Although, to be fair, it's passed through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear that it's kind of like the cell phone tax and everything else. We will pay for that.
And how do folks exercise that option? Has that been articulated yet, if they want it every other week?
What'll happen is, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks from the time this gets signed, and the council approves this. We'll sign this here in the next couple of days. It'll take about 6 to 8 weeks to contemplate, just to be safe, a 1 August complete conversion, but it'll start before that. And LeMay said they will be notifying every account holder by mail, and then if they don't get feedback and things like that, they'll make extra attempts to contact them. So we'll be contacted by LeMay and given a chance to make our selection.
And the other thing that's important to know is they will recycle your old can. Now that you're getting a new one, if you want to know what to do with your old can, they are recyclable. So
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. They mentioned that at the workshop last week.
Any initial questions for City Administrator Danek? If not, a motion would be in order. Question or motion? A motion has been made by Councilmember Coffey to adopt the solid waste franchise agreement. Motion's been seconded by Councilmember Gorski. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Coffey?
Aye.
Councilmember Quartz?
Aye.
Councilmember Eastham?
Aye.
Councilmember Gassick?
Aye.
Councilmember Gorski?
Aye.
Councilmember Trevor?
Aye.
Councilmember Whitman?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries unanimously. This brings us to our second opportunity of public comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak to any item on or off the agenda tonight? As the clerk.
I'll get up here eventually.
It's probably hurting because he was one of the many volunteers that we had out there when we were doing the repair work on Center Drive. He and his son were protecting everyone, keeping us safe by holding the stop and the slow signs. And so we, again, on behalf of the city, we appreciate what you did.
Our
There he is.
pleasure, our pleasure. Yes. 2 items I'd like to talk about tonight. One is, earlier this month, we had a couple of eagles that were living over by the museum. That made me stop and think, where did they come from? We've been having a lot of vegetation disappearing. So I was just wondering where the 2 eagles got. They have since moved on. But it also caused me another question, I think, and that is, with Tacoma City Light and with Puget Power, they have some rather large permanent poles or permanent towers. Just wondering if there's a possibility that we could contact them and maybe work on getting some nesting areas for them. Like I said, never saw them before in my history here dating back to 78, 79, living in the trees there behind the train. So they magically showed up this year, which was kind of exciting. The other thing, so A, I didn't think I'd be coming to talk about that. B, the other thing I didn't think I'd be coming to talk about is the proposed sidewalk ordinance. I don't think that's the right name, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
Sidewalk repair and
Sidewalk repair.
standards, I think is the
Um,
appropriate term.
Surprised, Councilman Gorski, I do support it. I know we've had some heated discussions, but I do support this idea. But I have two really important questions to ask. One is, I know that your tree board has worked real hard at coming up with species that are not going to dig up sidewalks. I also know that historically, we've been required to put flowering cherry trees in the historic village. My only question is, how do you reconcile flowering cherry trees that dig up sidewalks? And I'm just curious what the tree board is recommending, seeing I saw that the historic village was the #1 place that was going to start this whole thing. So that was one concern. The other one was, how do you reconcile the current street tree project and sidewalk and the ordinance? Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anyone that's out there that is interested in doing some research on a snag or putting up some eagle habitat, I would be open to that. I don't know if that's really good. Falls in the city's purview, to be honest with you, but I know that there has been, I know we're building an environmental education center in my day job, and that's actually something we're looking at as part of the construction of this building, is putting in some eagle habitat. So I know it is possible. There's lots of eagles that we're seeing up on top of the hill, so I think it's a neat idea. That's really, if someone wants to pursue that, we'd be open to what folks come up with. I'm not going to speak to the sidewalk ordinance. Councilmember Gorski can speak to that, or we can have that as part of an ongoing discussion that's happening with the council. Anyone else like to speak to any item on or off the agenda?
Renee Buck, 301 Brandywine. I unfortunately missed your special meeting last week with the comp plan presentation. When is the next public comment in regards to the comp plan?
May 11th.
Time, please.
I'd have to get back to you on that one, sorry.
Do I have to find it on the website? And is the presentation that was presented at the special meeting available for citizens to view?
Have to check that too.
All right, thank you.
We'll be sure to put it on the website if it's not already, just like we'll post the information on the meeting that'll be happening with the planning agency. Anyone else, public comments, any item on or off the agenda? Council comments? Councilmember Coffey?
On that same vein, the May 11th meeting is an open house, and I believe that the city should send out a flyer or a notice to every household in DuPont to make them aware of that meeting and to try to get a wide variety of attendance that evening.
I've seen funny looks, but not a comment. Councilmember Gassick?
Is that how we would normally notify people is by mail? Don't you just post that on the website and on social media pages? And what would the cost be for that?
We'd have to look into that. It's dependent, like when we did, when we wanted people to be made aware of the street tree pilot project, we actually incurred the cost of doing door hangers and going door to door. So it usually varies depending on what level of public engagement that folks want or feel is appropriate. And I'm open to that conversation with the council. The bare minimum, the standard that we do is we will post it on the web, we will put it on social media. If it's something that I know about ahead of time, I'll include it in that mayor's letter that's mailed out quarterly, but there's no time for that now. And so, I know that the cost would be minimal compared to, for something that's small, like a postcard, just to do a little FYI, save the date. But we have to have that guidance and feedback probably tonight to pull the trigger on that in a timely manner. Councilmember Coffey?
Yes, I believe the comp plan is a very important document that needs to be updated, and I believe that perhaps there is money in the contract that we have with Studio Cascade to do public awareness, and I feel, because the last meetings in his whole, the first set weren't that well attended. The first meeting was very well attended because it was advertised by household. And I believe that these are very important meetings that all citizens need to be notified.
Unless there's any objection, I think that's a reasonable request, and we can pull the trigger on it. And this is important, folks. I mean, we haven't updated the comp plan in forever, and this is why it was a priority for me to put in the budget. It's a shared priority for all of us. And not only is this comp plan important for us to update, it's also required by law. And not only that, it's important to continue this as a community conversation, because we can make annual updates. And so whatever's adopted this year will establish a baseline going forward. But this needs to be part of an ongoing conversation within our community, not only with the council and the planning agency, but all of us. And so continuing to raise awareness of this opportunity that's important is important. Councilmember Westman.
If I remember correctly, at the last joint meeting with the planning agency and council, there was not an opportunity for the public to actually participate in a Q&A. Is that going to be possible at the May 11th meeting, so that the citizens can have a direct input to those who are attending their council and the agency?
If you want to walk us through what that means.
Absolutely, Councilman Wilson. It's going to be an open house, so they'll have it on display, so they'll have display boards like you saw in the meeting process. And citizens will be able to talk with the consultant, look at the process where we've been so far, look at some of the ideas that he's working on for the draft. After that, it goes to the planning agency for the official state mandated public events like the hearings and things like that. So the draft will go to the planning agency for a public hearing, their consideration, their recommendation on keeping it, changes, whatever. Then it comes to you, you'll repeat the public hearing process, and you'll have a number of meetings on that as well before you finally ratify the final version, whatever that looks like.
Several more touches. And when we send out the notification, I think it's important that we might as well spell out as many dates as possible that people can, have an opportunity for public comment, just in case they can't make that workshop. Any additional council comments? Councilman Reese.
I know we have a due out a week from today to help get back to us on what his findings were so far as the state and Weyerhaeuser. So I know we don't have a meeting between them, but I'm guessing you're going to emails.
Yes, I will. I'll make sure I get that info to you, the whole council.
And just my recollection was, I don't recall specifically Weyerhaeuser, Councilor Reese, but I know that the two people that he actually contacted me about who I had contacts and relationships with were Department of Ecology and the state geologist. Is there, you mentioned Weyerhaeuser, is that another touch or expectation? I remember
the viability of the plan being executed as discussed at the workshop. That's whoever he needs to talk to.
Okay. Councilor Wood.
Yeah, I think Weyerhaeuser was involved because of the consent decree. And from the original signatories of it, he was aware of that. And the feeling was, how much stake do they still have in it? Certainly the Department of Ecology and
Is it really a
DNR
process?
Yeah, so that was the reason that they needed to be touched.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we're tracking. Thank you. Additional council comments? All right, there's no executive session. We will adjourn the meeting